Hi, it is Chelsea Bowie with Chelsea Build, and today we are going to talk about title's role in real estate transaction. So we are very lucky to have Carrie Poffenberger here. She is Vice President and an escrow officer at Bluebonnet Abstract and Title, and she is going to tell us everything she knows about title, which I think is a lot.
I hope it's a lot.
No, I know it's a lot. So, Carrie, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, title, how long have you been working in that field?
In the field, total probably about 7 years now.
Okay.
Bluebonnet is relatively new, so we were a startup in 2020 during COVID, and got all the glorious war stories from that era.
Okay, we also are COVID babies, building babies, so we totally understand that.
Yeah, so much happened during that window of time and title, and it was really a good time to be a startup.
Yeah.
Because there were so many transactions happening that it really gave us a lot of transactions to not just, I air quote practice, because it wasn't practice.
Right. No,
they're actually transactions, but you learned a lot in a very short window of time because you were handling so many transactions. And so we were a startup. Then I had some previous title experience, so I came in with a little bit of experience on the examination side. Okay. So in the title world, we call it abstracting or examination. Okay. Some people use those words interchangeably, but we call it abstracting because everything in the state of Texas is organized by what abstract the land is parceled in. Okay. And so we call it, and that's how our title plants are organized, is by abstract. So say you're in A13, that's what we search when we do our title search. And so they call it abstracting. But then there's an examination side to it where you actually read the documents and put exceptions on the title commitment. And so that was kind of my background, was the research side.
Okay, so that actually answers one of the big questions I had, because every time I see the name Bluebonnet Abstract and Title, I'm like, okay, well, abstract, what does that mean? Right. So thank you, because I was embarrassed to ask that question out loud. And Bluebonnet, great name, by the way, because we are like in the heart of Texas where we have the best bluebonnets, right?
Right. Yeah. I do not get credit for that.
Okay.
I can take credit for a lot, but I can't take credit for that. So Shane Nelson and Brad Beavers and actually another partner started the title company in 2020. And I was not part of the initial startup, and they chose the name, the logo. They did a great job in all of that. And we were friends, and in passing, he was, admitting that he was drowning a little bit and needed help. Why. And I was like, title was my favorite job. And he was like, please come to work. And I was like, no. So I told him no for a couple of times, but he kept
and then he begged
pressing.
You.
And it really is a fun job if you like it. Like if you are into title, you really enjoy it. Okay. And so I finally said yes to a part-time gig, and things escalated quickly.
Okay. And you guys have, I'm sure it did escalate quickly because you have more than one location, right?
We have 4 locations.
Whoa, I thought there were 3, so I'm learning things. Okay, so Brenham, Belleville, College Station?
College Station and Round Top.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
wow.
And we're actually licensed in 13 counties now.
Wow.
Maybe one of them is like still pending, but yeah. So one of the things that we wanted to do as a company was serve realtors that don't just do work in one county. We really wanted to have like a reach for rural counties in this area, the Bluebonnet window.
Yeah.
And so we have just been building out title plants as we can.
Okay, and that makes so much sense because like you're saying, we are in a rural area. So if we were in the city, then being hyper-focused in a section of the city would make more sense, but we're just a big rural, big community out here. So, okay. Now you mentioned something, you said you are licensed in 13 counties, is that correct? Okay, so you don't just have to be licensed in Texas to be an escrow officer or a title company. You have to be licensed specifically in counties?
So there's two different licenses.
Okay.
You will get licensed as a title agent with TDI, and then your title plant has to be licensed with TDI, and then underwriter approved.
Okay.
So you have to show that you have all the records that to search, and you can go far back enough in a search to insure on a property. And there's all these different regulations on what your title plant has to be able to do.
Okay.
You get kind of tested on that.
Okay.
On a search, and then you can get licensed.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay. And we want you guys to be licensed because you are, like, we were talking about this earlier, but you're kind of the regulation middleman between the sellers and the buyers, or the bank and the lendee.
Right.
And so you hold money, you do the research, you guys are kind of in charge of everything.
Yeah, and I think there's like this misnomer that title insurance is a ripoff or a scam, or, you know, you hear people, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but they kind of ignorantly say that and pass that knowledge on. And while there is some things that I can see are valid, like if a property changes hands 8 times and it's the same title commitment every time, you never really had to touch it, then I could see where that feels like a waste of money. But you're insuring to a new buyer, and so anytime it's held by that owner, any number of things can happen. They could go through a divorce. They could owe child support, and there'd be child support liens. They could go through bankruptcy. So one of the things that title does is we do all the curative work. Okay. So maybe you're never going to have a claim on your policy that we issue you. Hopefully not. Yeah. But the reason you didn't is because we put hours of work trying to make sure that you don't. So I say 90% of title insurance is the curative work that we do to make sure you don't have a claim. Right. And so that's what we're honestly paid for. And then we're also a settlement agent. So we are an insurance agent, and then we also are a settlement agent. And so that is, we have regulations on what's considered good funds. We receive good funds, and then we pay everybody in good funds. Okay. So we're an in and out for the money, and we're regulated in a sense that all of our accounting has to match. We have to have invoices for everything that's paid out. And so we have to give an accurate accounting to not only the parties involved, but the state can come in at any moment, or any of our underwriters, and say, we want to see how you handle these people's money. And so we're very careful.
And that is, I mean, that is kind of scary for some people. I mean, we've talked about it in the past. As a home builder, we are building houses that's probably the most amount of money that anyone is going to spend in their lifetime. Right. And the same with you guys. When someone buys a house, whether it's a cash deal or through a loan, construction loan or a home loan, they are trusting you with probably the most amount of money that they're ever going to trust anyone with. Right. And so that's a big commitment. They want to trust you.
It is, and we don't take it lightly. I mean, it's a very sacred moment for a lot of people. Yeah. And I really try to remember that and look at that each time I'm in the closing room with someone, because it's so important for them, and their net worth, I mean, is a lot of times tied to what real estate they own. Yes. And so it's very important. And, you know, because fraud is so rampant these days and AI is getting so good, there's so many people that, resist technology and they don't like portals and all of that. But those portals are used to encrypt their information and keep people out of important documents. Right. And so I'm always trying to, make the customer happy, but also relay the importance of your information not being out there for everyone. So a lot of what we do is it has to be a cashier's check or a wire that we receive and on incoming funds, and that's regulated by the state. So I can't receive your cash. I can take a personal check for up to $1,500, but that's it. Right. So everything else has to be what is air quotes good funds. And I am sending out wiring instructions, but fraudsters know that I'm going to do that. Right. And so since there is no less than 8 parties on a lot of these transactions, I don't know whose email is hacked. Right. Neither do they. Right. Yeah. And so they're just could be quietly watching in the background, waiting for me to send wiring instructions. And then they send them another email saying, just kidding, use these. Yes. And so I have seen, now title companies do a great job of trying to mitigate that risk by saying like, hey, after I send you this, I will not change it. This does not change. You will not get a text from me saying that this changes. And what else do title companies do to make sure that fraud doesn't happen? Well, I mean, it's on the going and the coming. Okay. Or like the coming in and going out. Sorry to say that wrong. But so I'm sending you wiring instructions to receive from you. Right. And we try to, have conversations on the phone. We try to do continuing education for real estate agents to educate their clients. But it really, truly is so important to just be a drum beat of please watch on the wires. Yeah. If it says you're wiring it to Bluebonnet, or you're supposed to wire it to Bluebonnet, it shouldn't have somebody else's name there. Yeah. Like, that's not the account that we're using. Right. I'm trying to think of a for instance, but some of them are really good and they'll open an account that looks very similar, right? But it's, using a capital I instead of an L in Bluebonnet or something. And so I don't know why a bank would let them do that to happen, but they, it could be that's just the little discrepancy that you're trying to avoid. So we try to just relay the importance about them wiring our money to us. And then we're very careful on wiring money out. And so like the seller's funds, again, this is the most money that they've ever probably are going to receive. And so we get wiring instructions either in person or through an encrypted source. Okay. And then we put it through what we call safe validation on our side. And it's a wire authentication platform that we can go in and put in the details of their wiring instructions and just get a thumbs up or thumbs down on them. Sometimes it's like a rural bank and they won't safe validate, so we'll call the customer and validate. So there's different protocols that we have to just make sure that we are being extra careful with your money. Yeah, well, we appreciate that. Yeah. That makes so much sense. Yes, it's kind of funny because people will get annoyed, but you're like, I'm really just trying to be careful. This is for you. Yeah. Yeah, so that's funny. Okay, can we go back to title insurance for just a second? Sure. Because I know, like you said, some people treat it almost like when you buy like a $25 thing from Walmart and like the thing pops up that says, do you want to spend $20 on a warranty for this item? And you're like, no, that's stupid. Yeah. And I know some people have that mentality when it comes to title insurance and they're like, why do I need this? And you touched a little bit on what it protects people from. Can you expand more on that? Like have you seen any instances where it's come in handy for someone or where you've had to use it? I think yes and yes.
Okay.
So as a title insurer, I can issue a couple of different policies. I can issue an owner's policy to the new owner.
Okay.
And what that protects against is seller fraud.
Okay.
Missing interest that may, we read the will, but we couldn't find one person, or one person wasn't listed.
Okay.
In the will, but they had an interest, and
they're going to come out of the woodworks and say, hey,
that's probably a bad scenario. Let's just say there's no will. Okay. And this happens all the time. People die without a will.
Yeah.
So Sally dies and she has 4 kids.
Okay.
And the 4 kids come to us and say, okay, we're selling mom's property. We're her children. Her husband died. They were married. We're their only children.
Okay.
So we go, okay, we're going to put that in the public record with an affidavit of heirship.
Oh, okay.
So we'll close with an affidavit of heirship. These are the facts of Sally's life. She was the owner of the property. These are her 4 heirs. Okay. Well, nobody knew where the 5th brother was, so we were calling him not, he didn't exist.
Right.
Well, here comes 5th brother after closing, and we have a buyer that paid full price for the property. Money's already out, but brother is saying, I didn't get any money.
Right.
And we didn't know about brother.
Right.
But there's title insurance to help with those kind of things.
To make sure that the buyer is
protected.
Right.
So it is definitely a protection for the buyer.
Okay.
So because of that, you always want to be thinking, as the buyer, I want to look over this insurance policy because it's real important to me to know what's covered and what's not.
Right.
So a lot of it is, ownership issues. In the state of Texas, to have a valid deed, it doesn't have to necessarily be recorded at the courthouse.
Okay.
So say Sally deeded the property before she passed away to John.
Okay.
And they never recorded that deed. And then Sally's children came in and said, well, we want to sell mom's property. She didn't tell them that she deeded it over. So they sell mom's property just based on being her heirs. And then John comes forward with this deed that he has that never got filed at the courthouse. There could be title insurance to hedge that buyer of that property. So there's different things that it can help cover. We also research for different easements on the property. Oil and gas leases are going to be disclosed, but oil and gas and mineral interest is not something that title insurance covers because that's like a separate estate.
Even if it passes with the land, even if you get full ownership of all of it, that's still not covered.
Right. So
that would be, you would have to have a different
it's not
sort of
a vehicle.
insurance?
Yeah, it's not a vehicle by and large to cover mineral estate issues.
Okay.
There's just way too many ways for the mineral estate to be severed and not seen that we just don't insure. But there are additional coverages you can buy and add to your policy that say, okay, I didn't know that it was going to be leased or there was mineral owners that could lease this.
Right.
And now they may damage my property. There could be coverages available to the buyer that they could have added to their policy and that could help kind of at least with damages if the oil and gas company didn't follow through on that. There could be title insurance claims as well.
Interesting. Okay.
Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah. Okay, and then so you're saying title and deed a lot, obviously, because that's what we're talking about. Can you sort of tell us what the difference is between title and deed?
Okay, so Chelsea is in title to this property.
Okay.
But we're going to use a deed to convey title to her.
Okay.
So the deed is the vehicle to convey the property.
Okay.
And so you can say sometimes deeded, or it can be a verb, or it can be a noun.
Okay.
But it's just a way of conveying, and you can also be conveyed property through probate process.
Okay.
So that's a vehicle to get property through judicial, like a court order. That can be a vehicle to convey property. But it really needs to, we make sure it's filed in the real property records so that we know you're entitled. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Divorce decree, that can be a vehicle for conveyance sometimes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. I always thought maybe they were like interchangeable kind of, but not really. Okay. So do you have any horror stories about, because I've heard horror stories about like people being behind on taxes or falsifying like deeds, or like maybe a home, a HELOC being outstanding, and so then the new owner is, in trouble.
Yeah.
Which insurance would help with that, I'm sure. But have you heard any crazy stories?
I've heard of a lot, Okay. I try not to use the C word, or like we haven't had the C word happen.
Yeah.
So, we are just at the mark where you would kind of start seeing possible claims come through. So, knock on wood.
Nothing.
We haven't, gone through that process yet, but it's just a matter of when. It's not that it'll never happen. Right. I don't ever want to put that out there. But, so as far as horror stories, all those things are very relevant things that could happen. If someone has a HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit, you can have, owe $100,000 one day and go out the next day and take out 50. So when I got my payoff, if I didn't get a freeze letter with the payoff, then they technically still have an open line of credit.
Right.
And the day of closing, go get $50,000 that I didn't know about.
On your house.
On someone else's house.
Yeah.
And so, yes, that would be a claim. And then there would probably be someone trying to recover, an attorney trying to recover those funds on behalf of the title company. But yes, that is definitely something that
could happen.
Could very well happen.
We will.
Yes.
Okay.
Unpaid taxes, that happens. I actually missed unpaid taxes before.
Okay.
And I would call this kind of you pay to play.
Right.
And so we ended up having to pay the taxes because it wasn't the borrower, the new buyer's responsibility, and it is something that we insure. And so we paid it, and we asked the seller to pay it, and we're still waiting.
Okay.
But I mean,
so
that is part of what we do. We're on the settlement side, is make sure that there's nothing outstanding that's going to be a surprise to that new homeowner as best as we can,
Yeah.
And that has limits, but I also have heard of a claim. This wasn't, I don't know the county, but there was a pipeline easement missed.
Okay.
And new owner didn't know about it. It wasn't on the title commitment. It wasn't on the survey.
Okay.
And so they went to build their new barn and built right over the pipeline. And
oh no,
I believe that the title insurance company had to pay to move the pipeline.
Okay.
It was like cheaper to move the pipeline than it was to
move the barn.
Yeah. But
that makes sense to me.
yeah. So,
wow.
I mean, it does happen, and that's not fun. Like, that's what would keep me up at night. Not to mention, again, people are trusting you to do your job correctly at every stage that you have. Mm-hmm. And for that to happen is just mortifying.
Yeah.
As, a business owner, just thinking, oh, this is a huge deal for this family.
Right.
And this landowner. And so, yeah.
But you got it fixed and it's taken care of. And
yeah. I mean, it wasn't my claim. That was one that I heard of. But it just, the responsibility is a big one.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that goes into each closing, honestly, because there's so many levels and layers to what we insure, from liens to pipelines,
Yeah.
You've got to know kind of all of that. So.
Yeah, there's so much that can happen. So does a closing differ, like just a standard home that's already been built versus closing on a construction loan? Does that differ at all for you guys? What's that?
Yes. So anytime somebody says construction, mm-hmm. in the title world, it's like ping, ping, ping. This is different. Like I have a different set of things that I need to be looking at.
Okay.
So I guess
Pipelines.
I'll back up. Yeah. And say that we issue an owner's policy to the new owner.
Okay.
And then one of the things that we do is we insure loans. So we'll issue a loan policy to lenders.
Okay.
Okay. So what that does is that is an insurance policy to the lender that you are in first lien position.
Okay.
And if you're not, you know about everything else. So that's why taxes have to be paid, because taxes would go in front of the loan policy I just issued on. So I have to pay them.
Yeah.
Builders and mechanics liens can go before, if there was prior construction and we didn't know about it and they didn't pay that bill, it would jump in front of the lender and be in first loan lien position. So that's why we have to be so careful that construction has not started until we've closed that loan with the lender.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of banks, I know, they go out and do like a little property inspection to make sure nothing has happened. And I know a lot of them won't issue a loan if you've already started. Like if you've got a foundation and you decided, hey, now I want to go ahead and get a construction loan, banks kind of get a little scared of that.
Yes, there is a window. So mechanics liens can't just indefinitely be filed. So a lot of times they'll say, okay, your waiting period is 6 months.
Okay.
Or everybody that has delivered any supplies to the site, dirt, concrete guy, plumbing, anybody that could have done work if there was a slab needs to have signed a lien waiver or something that they have been paid in full and we are not going to file a mechanics lien. Okay. So there has been some need to like have that in place before so that we could insure for a lender, but that can be messy just depending on how many subs showed up. Right. And how many places you bought materials. Right. It's kind of a nightmare. So the best thing is that you have not started any work. No dirt's been delivered, no supplies, because title's listening for that and the lender. Like we both cannot know that there has been anything going on.
Yeah. Okay, we did just close on a property or on a construction loan with a client recently, and they had a will done. And so we had to get
a lien waiver.
Yep. From the well the
and
driller.
That's really because I'm issuing a policy to the lender that you are in first lien position.
Yeah.
And the lender cares because if they know about it, and I can prove that they knew about it, they didn't tell me about it.
Right.
And so it can void some of the coverage I'm giving.
Okay.
But yes, and then also the policy, when we know that there is construction going on, we'll also put some special language in the policy, the loan policy, and it's called pending disbursement language. And so you might see that sometimes on Schedule B when you're closing with a construction loan. And the reason why is, say the lender is, the total build is for $1 million. And then I'm issuing a title policy for up to $1 million.
Right.
But it is only going to be up to what has actually been dispersed on the loan.
Right.
So if there were a claim to come in, the policy is only worth what was actually dispersed.
Okay.
So that would be kind of moved down to, like, say it was only $250.
Right.
Then that's what the policy value is.
That makes sense.
At the moment. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Okay. Also, backtracking back, you talked about getting attorneys involved in fixing some things. Now, Shane Nelson at Bluebonnet, I know he is an attorney.
He is.
And that's something that I've heard a lot in the title world, is that a lot of those companies have attorneys either on staff or in their partners in the company. Is that necessary, or is that just
so you
smart?
Can be it's both. No, you can be licensed. So I could have my own license. I'm not an attorney. I could be a licensed title agent.
Okay.
And be a title insurance agent without an attorney.
Okay.
In ownership.
Okay.
I would not even have to have one on my payroll.
Okay.
But we work so closely with attorneys because every transaction needs what? A deed.
Yeah.
So you'll have either a lot of attorneys like be the owner of the title company, or you will have them work so closely that they help the title company that they're working with, because it's a mutual arrangement.
Okay.
Because we're funneling you business, and, you know, in turn, I need to do good too. So can I please, you know, have help here?
That makes sense.
So you can see it kind of structured a lot of different ways, but Shane is an attorney. He started out patent and trademark. He still does some of that.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. He's an engineer. He's actually a chemical engineer and attorney. Yeah.
Okay.
He's one of those brainiac people.
What else can he do?
Yeah. He's really good with paperwork. But then we also have an on-staff attorney, Clint Colby. So his specialty is business law and real estate transactions. So he's super helpful too. They have teamed up and formed Colby Nelson law firm.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're fun. And
as fun as attorneys can be. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, actually, they have like changed my perspective of like serious attorneys, because they're just nuts, but in a fun, nice way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you have to have, there's so many legal documents that need to be prepared for each transaction that you do have to have at least a close relationship with whoever's preparing documents. The beauty of having people on staff and very involved in the operations of the title company is that you can have things in a timely manner. So say I'm outsourcing that, it's going to be totally different skin in the game, for, you know, for that attorney than somebody who's owner operator wants to help
get things closed.
Wants to get it done. So he's in turn done a lot of pro bono legal stuff, you know, or been cheap labor through the title company, just to be helpful for the transaction. And so,
which that helps everyone.
It does help everyone, you know. And then, you know, there's a lot of things that you have to cure, what we call curing title. So like, there's either dead people or there's a missing link in the title chain that we've got to put on paper so that everybody that looks at this chain of title knows why we let these people sign this deed. So we may file some affidavits before we file the warranty deed with their signatures on it, because we're telling you how they got into title.
Okay.
And are able to be the signers on this deed.
So a missing link, like a previous owner, or you don't know, you can't find who had ownership at that time, or
there's like all kinds. There's a variety of things, but like, yes, most of the time it's dead people, or we think we know everybody, but we don't. You know, we can't say for sure. So yeah, it's always measuring risk, you know, and so what's insurable, and then what is the probability of this being a big issue or not.
So you guys basically are solving mysteries every day, and just
every transaction's different. That's one of the reasons I love it, is nothing is the same. You know, you begin to tell a story with this property, and you get family details that you would have never gotten otherwise, and how it affects the title chain, and it's just interesting, you know.
I'm sure. So, you know, we recently bought a few acres downtown that we're hoping to do a little project on, and there is a house sitting on the property that was built in 1880.
Oh, cool.
And someone reached out to me on Facebook and said, hey, that was actually like my dad's office. And I said, okay, tell me everything.
Yeah. What do you know?
It's like, it's interesting. There's a lot of history, and it's just,
There is, and this is the birthplace of Texas.
Yeah.
And so we're in this little tri-county area where everything started.
Yeah.
And so we have a robust, rich history here that is super cool when it starts getting fleshed out, to make sure that you're actually in title, you know. But it's really neat, and we're in the South, and so there was slavery that affected things. There was, you know, the post-trauma of, you know, post-slavery trauma that affected titles to property, because, you know, some of these families did not trust the lawyers to do a deed for them. So there was no deed. Or I'm not going to trust the courthouse to record it correctly because you haven't proven yourself trustworthy. Right. So there's properties still being unpacked. You know, they've got something of a lot of value now. Right. And it's trying to figure out how insurable it is part of what we do.
That is so cool. Well, Carrie, thank you for coming on and giving us all of these stories and fun things to think about. We really appreciate you.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And I feel like there's so much more we could talk about.
I know.
But yeah, thanks. And I'm just excited about your new project, really. Oh, I cannot wait to see what y'all do. We are too.
I mean, nervous, so nervous. But we're hopeful. Yeah.